All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today here at Global Conservation Force for a very special presentation on pangolins. Today, we are going to talk about how the plight of pangolins depends on positive relationships with people like you. Now, if we haven't met before, my name is Lauren Ayres, and I am the Pangolin Project Coordinator for Global Conservation Force, where I help organize, plan, and implement programs related to pangolin conservation. Now, I've spent the last 15 years working in the zoological field, and by happenstance, was lucky enough to work with a pangolin in a zoo about 6 years ago. Now, immediately I fell in love with them, and I wanted to do more to protect them in the wild, which is kind of how my role in GCF was created. So in today's presentation, we're going to be discussing adaptations of pangolins, why humans and pangolins aren't getting along so well, and how you can help pangolin conservation efforts right from your home. Now, don't worry, it's not just about donating money. Since this presentation is live, if you have any questions or comments, you are more than welcome to type them into your chat box, and our moderator will be sending them over to me to answer at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes or so in the beginning, and then halfway through the half hour, we're going to go into kind of a question and answer session. Mike Veal, who is the director of Global Conservation Force, is going to come on in and help moderate some of your guys' questions. So I'm eagerly looking forward to that. Now, being a live presentation, I want you guys to be safe. If you get distracted easily, don't be driving and watching this presentation. Actually, even if you don't get distracted easily, don't be driving and watching this presentation or doing any other activity that might need your full attention. It will be recorded and reposted on the Global Conservation Force website and social media. So feel free to watch it at a later time if right now isn't ideal. You can actually pause it and then come back on. So if you need to go to the restroom or grab a snack while you're watching, feel free to do so. And then you can watch those parts that you miss later on. So pangolins are what we are going to primarily talk about today for lack of better alliteration. And they are the most amazing animals, in my opinion, in the entire world. They've got a variety of different adaptations. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about some pangolin adaptations. So I've got a little pangolin here. Obviously, this is not a real pangolin. This is a stuffed animal, fake pangolin. I don't have any real pangolins here at home, and that's where I'm filming from. But we're going to look at him from his nose all the way down here to his tail, and we're going to talk about each and every single little adaptation that they have. Now, first and foremost, pangolins have a pretty large nose. There are about 8 different species of pangolins, and every single one of them, the first thing that you look at is you're like, hey, they've kind of got a long face. And that really long nose is super helpful for them to sniff out their food. So primary food of a pangolin is going to be ants and termites. Now, the species of ants and termites kind of depends on where those pangolins live. Pangolins are found on 2 different continents, Africa and Asia. There's 4 species found in each of those continents, so 8 species total. All of them are insectivores, and they'll use that nose to hunt and find their ants or termites that they're going to snack on. Now, this little guy doesn't have my favorite feature of pangolins, and that's their really long tongue. In some species, it can be up to 16 inches long. Now, it's a really long, skinny, sticky tongue that they will actually use to put into ant nests or termite mounds and slurp up those insects. Now, their mouths can only open about the width of roughly a pencil or your pinky finger. So if you look at your pinky finger right now, you're not going to get bit by a pangolin. Right? Maybe if you were to just really try hard, you could get bit by a pangolin. But another reason you can't get bit by a pangolin is because they don't have any teeth. So pangolins are basically just, old men without their dentures. They have a gummy mouth, and they use that tongue to go all the way down, and it actually connects right in their belly. at the very, very top of their stomach. So it goes all the way down their esophagus, and they'll use that tongue to bring it down those ants into their stomach. Now, they are known to swallow rocks, just like birds do, to help churn up those ants and termites down there, but they've got super, super acidic stomachs, so they don't really need to chew, which is why they don't end up having any teeth. So can't get bit by a pangolin, but you guys should always be careful. Anything with a mouth can definitely bite. Now, in order to hunt for ants and termites, pangolins either live way up in the trees or they are on the ground. They're fossorial or terrestrial. And basically, they have little claws. So this guy just has little felt claws here to simulate them. But those claws are really, really excellent for the arboreal species because they can climb up the trees. And they're really, really excellent for the fossorial or terrestrial species because they can dig burrows as well as tear open ant nests and termite mounds. Now this guy here has a pretty long tail. He, I believe, is a Sunda pangolin, which is a species that you would find in Asia. But this little tail that he's got right here is very long. Now, pangolins will actually use their tails primarily for things like balance, you know, kind of like a rudder on a boat. But really, really long-tailed species of pangolins are going to be the ones that you're finding up in the trees. They will actually use those tails as, oh, I dropped my pangolin, hold on. They will use those tails as a fifth limb. So when you live up in the trees, sometimes it's kind of hard to move around and you might slip. So they use that tail to grab on. It is prehensile, which means grabbing or grasping. Now, on the very, very tip of their tail, they actually don't have any of their key identifying features, and that is scales. The very tip of their tail is almost like a thumb. It holds on to branches if they are one of the arboreal species. So this guy you can't tell very well because he is also, you know, a stuffed animal toy, but I have a really neat print to show you up close what a pangolin is actually covered in. So this guy looks like he's covered in fur. Pangolins are not covered in fur. The number one key feature of a pangolin is going to be their scales. So this is actually not pangolin scales, it's just fabric that is printed to look like pangolin scales. And you can see that pangolins will have hundreds of these interlocking scales. Now, these scales are made out of keratin, which is the same thing as our fingernails. And unfortunately, although they are meant to protect the pangolin, they are the main reason why pangolins are in trouble. So people across the world in many different cultures are using pangolin scales and pangolin scale products falsely believed to have medicinal value. So being made out of keratin, the same thing as our fingernails, these pangolin scales that look just like this, pangolin scales, they don't have any medicinal value. You could probably do the same thing just eating your fingernails and you would get the same kind of benefit. But a lot of people in those cultures don't even realize that the products that they're using actually come from an animal. So I want you guys to just sit for a second and think, what do I have in my home that is coming from an animal product? What kind of animal products do you guys have? Now, some of you might have meat in your home, which is obviously an animal product. Some of you might have an antler rack from hunting. Some of you might even have some sort of fur. But a lot of things that we have in our home actually do come from animals, and we don't really think of it. So one example, and this is just to kind of relate you to other cultures that possibly are using pangolin scale products without realizing they come from animals. One product is gelatin. So the main ingredient in Jell-O or gummy bears or even a lot of jellies and jams is gelatin. And gelatin actually is an animal product. It comes from the hooves of fetal cows or even horses. And gelatin, being an animal product, comes from animals that have no longer been with us. Now, a lot of people out there might not realize that that is an animal product. And in the same token, a lot of people do not realize that pangolin scales and pangolin scale products are actually coming from pangolins or animals themselves. So it's something we should all really kind of be aware of, is even though we have a lot more sustainable ways of obtaining animal products in countries like the United States, pangolin scales are also being used here in the US. The US is the #3 destination for pangolin scales to come to illegally. And so it's something that every single one of us should care about, whether you're in the United States, whether you're in the UK, whether you're in South Africa, it doesn't matter. On the moon, we should all care about pangolin conservation. Now, it's kind of hard to, especially right now during quarantine and all of COVID-19, to know exactly what we're supposed to do to help take part in pangolin conservation. So I do have a couple tips for you guys on how to basically get your feet wet in pangolin conservation. So first and foremost, spreading the word about pangolins. So just by tuning in today, I'm hopefully speaking to quite a few different people that may or may not know about pangolins and not know exactly what they do or exactly what they can do to help them. So first, post on social media. Social media is a wonderful tool for sharing conservation messaging. So post some cute pangolin pictures, share this video, any of those things. Those are excellent ways for you to not spend a dime and help support pangolin conservation efforts. Now, another way to help does involve getting out your wallet. You can see right down below, we've got the Global Conservation Force website and donating to reputable pangolin conservation organizations. So if you go to our website, you can see all of the partners that we at Global Conservation Force are working with, many of which are involved in pangolin conservation or are rangers that are protecting pangolins out in the wild. Pangolins are in trouble because of human activities. And while one individual might not be the cause, each individual can be part of the solution. The plight of pangolins depends on positive relationships with people like you. So without wildlife wet markets, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in right now with COVID-19. Now think about that for a second. Where would you be now if COVID-19 didn't occur? What would you have done in the last year that you weren't able to do because of restrictions and lockdowns? What's changed in your day-to-day life because of COVID-19? Now, those are all some pretty powerful thoughts, ideas, memories that are all related to COVID-19 and in turn are related to pangolins. So pangolins possibly were the vector, meaning the way that the COVID-19 virus got from bats to humans, all because of the illegal wildlife trade and consumption of wild animals. So what I'm going to ask of each and every one of you out there is, if you're watching this presentation, go out and just tell one person about a pangolin. Tell them what you learned today, share a cute picture to your social media, repost the video so more people can learn about pangolins. By spreading informed and educated messages about pangolins, you can easily help be the change of what I like to call the most adorable artichoke puppies. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you're not already following Global Conservation Force, feel free to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of the things. If you do that, you can get notified of our upcoming events. And we're going to have several more of these presentations from our other coordinators that are in the coming weeks with each of our different project coordinators, like I said. But now we're going to transition into the portion of the presentation where we are going to answer some questions and hang out for the next 10 minutes or so. So if you have not dropped your question in the chat, please do so. And our moderator, Mr. Mike Veal, will pass it along to me. So thank you again for joining us in the fight to save wildlife from extinction. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Lauren. Great job. Thanks for covering all those details.
Yeah, that was a lot.
That's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot in a short amount of time. We so far just have a comment from Valerie Suarez, And she says pangolins are the best, which I think this is the appropriate crowd for that.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Pangolins are 100% the best. Mike, I know that I have some projects that I'm working on with pangolins and global conservation force. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the canine projects that we have going on?
Yeah, that's a great start. So pangolin conservation is pretty diverse, like Lauren had mentioned earlier. Since they overlap rhinos and elephants in most places of the world, in Africa and Asia, and that could be in the current range or the historical range of those species, we've been able to kind of double, triple, and quadruple down on the conservation and protection efforts of certain species with ranger protection. And with ranger-based protection operations, our canines come into play. And the canines are a really fun and unique way to, I guess, dive further into more conservation efforts and protection efforts. So right now, we support canine projects that have pangolins in the wild in their reserve habitat zones. We have a canine on deck who's going to actually be working on a very special pangolin project. We don't want to give too much away, but that's Clive. If you guys have seen Clive in the adoption circuit, he is a young lab. He's training with scent imprint dogs for conservation in the Netherlands. And so he's learning basically how to track pangolins in the wild, and he'll be working along law enforcement and researchers when he's deployed. And then we have Thor, who is a tracking hound who's also in training, who's been trained on indicating for pangolin. And Thor's duties were kind of balancing between putting at a port of access, like a large airport or even a shipyard, or do we put him on foot patrol with a high functioning ranger unit? So some type of ranger detail that is seeing a lot of pangolin based issues and could really use Thor's skill sets. Now our other canines that are on our team are not directly working on pangolin based duties per se, like they're not tracking them daily, but they're working with rangers to keep them safe. And Denali, the mother of our litter of Malinois, is actually rotating through duty, working at an orphanage that sees both pangolins and rhinos when they come through. So it's pretty cool. We just had a question come in from Ayres. What type of habitat is home for pangolins?
Oh, well, that's a really great question, because almost every single habitat you could think of, except for probably, like the cold, snowy mountains, is going to be where you would find a pangolin. But pangolins are pretty rare to find. So you're going to find them everywhere from South Africa all the way up into past the equator, north of the equator in Africa, eastern, all the way to the western side. Not quite up into like the Sahara Desert or anything like that, but you're going to find them on low grasslands, savannas. They're going to be in the mountains. They're going to be in forests. They're going to be in rainforests. So they even will live in areas where it gets a little bit cooler too, especially over in Asia. So in Asia, you're going to find pangolins all the way from India into China, as well as Vietnam, down through the islands, Philippines. And so they're mainly like a temperate species. So you're not going to find pangolins in the North Pole or anything like that. But a variety of different habitats are going to have their own specialized pangolin species, depending on where you're at.
Yeah, hot and humid is a pretty common place wherever it's at.
Yeah.
So we have another question, and I really like this one already. Jacqueline's asking, what are you doing to help educate communities that believe pangolin scales have medicinal properties? How do you tackle the root of the problem and change the belief system of an entire culture? Are you teaming up with rhino groups that are battling the same thing? Hi, so Jacqueline, I will take that first section. So we are a large rhino conservation organization ourselves, and we are working in both protection of the habitat, the wildlife trafficking investigations, and the international law enforcement cooperation to gather and help enforce further for both pangolin and rhinos. Wildlife crimes are seen in the same section. So if I'm working on a duty that has to do with trafficking, most likely the same individual who's trafficking pangolin scales is going to be working in rhino horn and ivory and other parts as well. So to answer that question, yes, we are partnered with a lot of different organizations focusing on expanding ground efforts and impact efforts that deal with all of the trafficking-based issues. And then coming back to the education of communities, we're doing quite a bit. So I'll let Lauren actually start with something we started back with a few years back at Save Vietnam's Wildlife and partnering with them. And then I'll jump back in and talk about where we've gone from there in between and all the way to now.
Yeah, so educating communities that have been using pangolin scales for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years is very, very difficult, especially as someone that is not native to that culture or that country. So we really, especially at Global Conservation Force, are doing a lot of empowerment and capacity building for communities that need a little bit of behavior change in terms of what kind of products they're consuming, but also by helping fund grassroots efforts within those countries. So Save Vietnam's Wildlife is a wonderful organization. If you guys are not familiar with them, be sure to check them out. They are an excellent ally for pangolins, and they're doing wonderful work rescuing, rehabilitating, and releasing pangolins in Vietnam. So they have an enormous education program there because Vietnam is a huge source for pangolins as well as a huge consumer of pangolins. So it's kind of a double whammy area where education is really, really important. So they have an education program, they have an education center at their rescue facility. And what we did in kind of the first pangolin project that I partnered up with Mike on was working with Save Vietnam's Wildlife on helping develop their educational components for their, missing the word, elementary education, the elementary kids. So they have a program where the kids come out for a 2-day field trip, get to experience nature, get to see the animals up close, and learn a little bit more about it. But what we found was that then they go home. And then that's the end of the discussion. And so how do we stop that? How do we keep the kids talking about these animals that they learned about and talking about, why they shouldn't be purchasing pangolin meat or using pangolin products? And so we developed a trading card program, kind of a game, and developed that with them. It is something that we are hoping to, it's kind of a back burner item, but hoping to roll out to several other communities and developing trading cards basically so kids are not only learning about the animals that these products are coming from, but learning how they can help and getting that discussion going on at home. Now, tackling the root of the problem and changing the belief system of an entire culture is definitely not something that we are going to do alone. So that is why when I say tell a person about a pangolin, and I talked a little bit about how you might have gelatin in your home and you didn't know that it was made out of animal products. A lot of times people don't even realize that the supplement that they have been taking, their aunt has been taking, their mom, their grandmother, in order to produce milk as a nursing mother, actually has pangolin scales in it. There are many people that have absolutely no idea in Vietnam that that is what they're using. They don't even know that it is a pangolin scale. And so by educating people, letting them know, hey, there are other alternative products that are a little more sustainable, it all comes from everybody. It's not just, Global Conservation Force out there. It's everyone out there. So I'll throw it back to Mike.
So yeah, and so an effort to tackle more volume and more people in a more targeted effort, what we did starting 2 years ago is we started our Wild Warriors project in Vietnam. And that partners with actually students from the veterinary school that's in Hanoi, Vietnam, one of the biggest demand cities. And the school program runs for kids that basically their parents are wealthy enough to afford most of these wildlife products. So this course is not a 2-day thing. It's actually embedded in the school system for a couple hundred students. And it goes for 3 months long, like an entire 3 months, going over multiple modules, multiple species, helping basically educate these kids with what they need to know to become wildlife warriors in their own communities and front runners and torch carriers for the cause. And what we're seeing already with that is a giant turnaround in how many youth-based projects and programs have started and how many of these kids are choosing science and conservation studies in their college years as they're going towards that now. And so it's really exciting because we aren't going to be able to physically be there at all times, nor really is it kind of our best approach to be there. We need to inspire and ignite and educate as many as we can, and give them proper tools and resources so that then they can amplify the efforts at home. And so we're seeing a positive change with that. Then on the other side, we also still are doing education projects in Southern Africa as well. So our youth outreach programs and game drive programs also include pangolin-based activities. And we are looking to expand that with some stuff coming up in Nigeria, right? It's here pretty soon, which is pretty cool. So it's always about kind of the only thing that limits us in the sense of how many students a year we can reach is funding. And education, unfortunately, is never the sexy side of conservation that pulls in the big funds, but we always set aside funds for it every year based off of our merchandise sales and our gala. And so luckily, we also have got a grant that maintains the Wild Warriors program. And we're hoping to secure more grants in the future so we can continue to multiply these modules because they're showing to be really effective.
Awesome. Yeah, a little bit about that Nigeria project. I did want to touch on it, and then I'll answer Christina's question. So we have recently partnered with a organization called Pangolino, which is basically just a nonprofit kind of word spreading social media organization, but it's run by a guy named Charles Morgar. And he is a PhD researcher that is from Cambridge University, but he's native to Nigeria. And so he is definitely a pangolin lover. And I have been meeting with him almost weekly for the last couple of months, developing a educational handbook, as well as some other things to kind of do what we did with Save Vietnam's Wildlife, aiding them in education and community-based outreach, but this time we're going to do it in Nigeria and help him. Now, another thing that he's got going, and we are kind of hoping to expand on, depending on funding, of course, is his new Pangolin Protectors project, which is going to be community-based, funding people that live in the areas where pangolins are being poached in Nigeria, and funding them to go out and do monitoring and to protect them, essentially. So empowering people that might actually be poaching them for money, but instead we're going to pay them to protect the pangolins. So giving a little bit of a ranger experience. So right now we're helping him get that off the ground in terms of doing things like training, funding for gear. Today, any of the donations that go into our Pangolin Directed Fund, which you can find on Global Conservation Force, will be going obviously directly to our pangolin projects. And hopefully we'll be able to get that educational workbook out for everybody to be able to see too, in addition to getting it out to the kids in Nigeria in February. So thank you, Jacqueline. That was amazing questions. Totally on point. So Christina, the name pangolin comes from, now I'm not going to remember the language, but it's Pangolin, which means one who rolls up. They are nocturnal, which means that they are going to be active at night, which is very, very beneficial for them because they have terrible eyesight. So if they're awake during the day, which some species do have, the tendency to kind of forage around whenever the ants are active, but ants are going to be, and termites, most active at night. So that's when they're going to be hunted. And how else do they protect themselves in the wild besides their scales? So pangolins are the most innocent animal in the entire world, and everyone should care about them because literally their scales are their only protection. While they do have big claws, those claws can't really break flesh or anything like that. They're not like cat claws that are going to tear anybody up. So basically, pangolins just roll in a ball and hope for the best, which doesn't bode very well for them against humans because we can just pick them up. Now, if they were going against something like a lion, there are certain species of pangolins, most notably going to be the Cape pangolin or Temminck's ground pangolin that you would find down in South Africa. Those guys are actually, their scales are strong enough to withstand the bite of a lion. So the scales can provide them a significant amount of protection, but unfortunately not enough for us humans.
That's a great point too with the human factor. Interestingly enough, the whole system with pangolins is what we in anti-poaching call uh, kind of like the crime scene list crime, in the sense that when you have a poaching situation go down with a rhino and an elephant, there's a crime scene there. You can figure out components of what happened, and there's going to be evidence. But when a pangolin is picked up somewhere in the middle of the bush in the wild, there's no alarm, there's no signal call, there's no distress call. They pick them up, they put them in a bag, and they walk away. And interestingly enough, with pangolin poachers, the most common age group is a young boy. It's between 11 and 15 years old on average for the one that's actually capturing the pangolins. Now, that's I mean, how do you protect yourself if a young boy can walk up and pick you up because you're going to roll into the ball and you're kind of like a mega sized roly poly just being stabbed in the bag. And so that's where, again, coming back to canines, canines that are working in detection circuits at the entrance and exits of reserves, port entries and port exits, and or road stops are the ones that are actually picking up the live indications of these species, or they're finding the truckloads of smuggled products. But then informants commonly lead to the live rescues of this. So working with informant networks and community-based conservation programs that build trust between the rangers and the communities, the rangers get a tip off about a smuggler and a pangolin being stashed in a trash can at the back of this restaurant, and the anti-poaching unit responds, or the police responds with an anti-poaching unit and comes and rescues them. And so it's really actually very difficult to protect a pangolin, even in areas that have reserve fence lines. Pangolins can scoot under fence lines, and they don't live within fence line areas. It's not like keeping in a Cape buffalo or an elephant or a rhino. So they can be found in many different places, which just expands the pressure of how the poaching comes at conservationists for so many different ways. Circling back again to the importance of wildlife education and the expansion of our wildlife education projects. Yeah. So it looks like that's our questions. If anybody else, I see we still have a fair amount of people live in the chat here. Feel free to drop questions while you have us. After this program ends, it will be posted and shared to our YouTube and our Instagram as well. Unfortunately, those folks aren't able to tune in live and ask questions, but you guys have the stage and the floor with us right now, so feel free to ask. And if they come through, see them live.
We always try and answer any comments. So if you are watching this and it's not live, we one of us will probably pop on there and see any comments later at the date. And you know, if you do have questions, you're more than welcome to type them on the comments on YouTube or wherever later on.
Yeah. Well, that was awesome. Job well done, Lauren, as always. And thank you all for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this program. Like Lauren said, we're going to have several more coming throughout the next couple weeks. Next up is actually going to be mounted anti-poaching units, our horseback rangers, and that's going to be led by Sally and Roxanne. Sally is our elephant projects coordinator, and Roxanne is our mounted projects coordinator and our field instructor for mounted units. So she actually goes out to the field and is training rangers on horseback. Sometimes she's the only one that speaks English, and the guys she's working with have no riding experience, and the horses are completely wild. So taking that experience from Rox and bringing it back home and sharing it, she has a ton of great stories. So in the meantime, thank you guys for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's program.
Yeah, thanks guys. See you later.
See ya.